start punting? At one point in your career, did you think you were good enough to punt in the NFL? Just give me the background story behind that.
Well, I'll give you the 30-second down and dirty.
Yep.
Growing up, not very big, not very fast. Figured out I had to do something to play. Started kicking pop cans over the fence. Then I figured, oh, hell, everybody can't kick a can over a fence. Then I got a football. Started kicking them over the house. I would be in one alley and kick it across the house to the other. Then I kicked it across the electric wires. And pretty soon, I was always the last guy chosen. Okay, well, Greg is going to kick. But I kicked for both teams. And I figured out that was something pretty special because I kicked for both teams. Nobody would hit me. Nobody would touch me. I was watching a game between the Baltimore coach and somebody else. They had those clean, pretty white uniforms on. Everybody else was bloody, muddy, and dirty. The punter went out, kicked the ball, walked back to the bench in his clean white uniform. At a very young age, I said, that's what I want to do, and that's what I want to be. And I was nourished in high school, Pop Warner football, high school, and in college I had an awesome coach at Florida A&M, a kicking coach by the name of Acosta Kittles. We call him Pop Kittles. And practicing one day, I'm just booming him down the middle, and Pop said, baby, why don't you kick it where they ain't? I said, what? Pop, that doesn't make sense. He said, well, kick it where they ain't. I said, what do you mean? Why are you kicking it down the middle? I said, well, that's where he's standing. He said, my point exactly. Make him work as hard as you're working. Kick it to the corners. Kick it to the right. Kick it to the left. So that was my forte coming into the NFL, the ability to put the ball in the corners. And when Bud Grant saw that, after I was cut by Cleveland, after Bud saw that I had the ability to do that, spent the next 10 years here in Minnesota kicking to the corners. And if I ever wanted to get the dander of Bud Grant or my coaches or even my teammates up, kick the ball down the middle. No. Had to be to the right, had to be to the left. I had some great gunners, started with Joey Bronner, Keith Nord, the late Keith Nord, Terry LeCount, Carl Lee. I mean, and a lot of these guys went on to be all pro, but they started being my gunners on my punt team.
Wow, great story. This is why we have Greg here. Last one, we'll let you plug your organization. Greg, as a fellow Christian, I want you to plug your organization foundation. Tell the audience real quick about Touch From Him Ministries.
Well, being in the ministry for a number of years, being an associate pastor at several churches in the Twin Cities area, and knowing that God has had his hand on me for such a long time, and he calls us to give. He calls us to serve.
Yep.
And he says, feed my sheep and make disciples. So our 21st annual golf tournament benefiting underserved youth through the YMCA programs is August 20th out at Bunker Hills. We use all 27 holes. We have close to 250 golfers, some Hall of Fame celebrities and celebrity golf tournament. And it's an awesome tournament. I feel that if we can invest in our young people on the front side versus the back side with state and tax dollars when they've gone awry, I think we're ahead of the game. All of our kids are not going to hell in a handbasket. We've got some tremendous people doing some amazing things with kids. And the programs that we have through the YMCA is the one that we are focused on. There are a lot of great organizations, but I choose to invest in young people on this side. So, if you're interested, we have a few other groups left. You can go to ymcamn.org/Coleman Golf. That's ymcamn.org/Coleman Golf. And, it's going to be a great time.
Awesome stuff, and we wish you the best of luck with that. You can follow Greg Coleman on Twitter at GregColeman8. Hey, man, thank you so much for giving me the time, and some great insight today. We will stay in touch.
Sounds
Greg
good.
Greg is just an outstanding guy, obviously a great player for the Vikings, really changed the game of punting in terms of what he was talking about with not punting it right to the punt returner, to trying to angle it out of bounds, which he did such a phenomenal job at. Every Viking fan that I've talked to can't say a bad word about him. So great spot for Greg, and appreciate again for giving us the time here on the Strom Sports Show here. And it's gotten me into the Vikings right now, who it has been, doesn't it feel like we haven't talked about the Vikings in such time here? I mean, you think about it, last year every show was basically Kirk Cousins, John DeFilippo, or the defense be disappointing. That was basically the three things that I would talk about on this show. And I want to do a little things differently this year. I want to try to get some sort of event line. My shows come out on Sunday morning, so I'll have the previews. I'll have the guys from the other. I'll have the beat writers from the other team coming on, and I'll get you guys ready for kickoff. But let's get into it here. Let me give you 3 storylines that I'm looking out for as training camp started on Thursday. First thing I'm going to really look at here is the Kirk Cousins and Kevin Stefanski full offseason. I was thinking about this a lot. When was the last time that the same quarterback and the same offensive coordinator went into the offseason together in year 2? And you got to go back here. Case Keenum was not supposed to start in 2017. That was Bradford's team. It was Case and Pat Shurmur working for this first time. In 2016, you had Sam Bradford and Norv Turner. They traded for Bradford before week 1, and he ended up starting week 2 or 3. I forget what it was. But that was a guy that never had time with his offensive coordinator in the offseason. 2015, Teddy Bridgewater and Norv Turner, they had a full offseason. What happened? They went to the playoffs. So I don't think there's any secret to this, that a Kirk Cousins and Kevin Stefanski having a full offseason together, having a full training camp together. They say they're in communication every day with each other, and they really work well. They really understand each other. I think that it's really going to help in the end here. You think about the obvious, right? And we don't really think of these types of things. We think of everything that's on the field. Okay, Kirk Cousins doesn't want to do this, doesn't want to throw down the field, checking it down. At the end of the day, Kirk Cousins threw for 30 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. And what we don't think is how he got along with the offensive coordinator John DeFilippo, how the blocking scheme was. And I know this year they're really simplifying it. I know the offensive line is going back to a simple zone scheme, okay? And I think that's really going to help this entire team because, let's be honest, the Vikings aren't the LA Rams. They aren't the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm not saying they're not better than them, but they're not that flashy team. Sean McVay's out there running a college spread offense with motion men, going shotgun 90% of the time. Andy Reid doing the same thing. The Vikings don't have to do that to be successful this year. They don't. They should give it to Dalvin Cook, create holes for him, get him going on the offensive side, keep him healthy, and start doing the play action. I think that Diggs and Thielen's stats are going to dip this year because they're going to be such a run-heavy team. But I think that's what ultimately wins championships. When you're willing to run the ball first and you're willing to dominate the line of scrimmage, I think that's bigger than anything else. And I think we're going to see that this year with Kirk Cousins, Kevin Stefanski, and the whole crew, as Gary Kubiak as well, who is obviously a tremendous pickup for this team. But I think we really need to look at the first storyline is Kirk Cousins and Kevin Stefanski getting the full offseason together. Next one here, the third wide receiver. I forgot. What was another thing that we used to talk about? Laquan Treadwell. And Laquan Treadwell checks in here. I think he's the third wide receiver in the depth chart. He's got Chad Beebe behind him. Look, you know who your top 2 guys are. You know what teams are going to try to take away, whether that be going zone against them, whether that be going man against them and having some safety over the top. You're going to need a guy in that slot. I know Aldrick Robinson isn't back, but he did a pretty decent job last year. Who's going to be that third guy? Is it going to be Chad Beebe? Is it going to be Laquan Treadwell? Because this is really a necessity, I think, this year, especially coming off the years that Diggs and Thielen came off of. I think a third wide receiver is going to be huge for this team. Not to make a crazy amount of catches, but they need to come out and probably make 4 or 5 a game. Big ones, nothing crazy like that. Just make sure you're getting first downs. As much as I think that the 2 tight end game is going to be effective with Irv Smith and Kyle Rudolph, I think that the third wide receiver position is something that the Vikings should take care of. And I know I saw Allen Hurns get cut by the Cowboys. It was an intriguing fit, but once again, they're so handcuffed with cap space. I don't think it was possible for them to go out and get someone. But this third wide receiver position, I think, is really important. Who's it going to be, and what are they going to do about it? Because I've seen, I think, enough of Laquan Treadwell along with you guys to think that this guy He's just never going to figure it out. And maybe he comes out and he has a great year, but from my standpoint, I just can't see it happening. We'll keep an eye on that third receiver position. I think that it's very, very essential to a big run here. Now, last one. The obvious, cliche, and we know that the Vikings' offensive line is the biggest question mark of them all. I want to take it a step further. How will the tackles hold up this year? Instead of the guards, instead of Pat Eflon and Josh Klein and Garrett Bradbury, because it's going to be Eflon and Klein are going to be the right and left guards. Let's look at the tackles really quickly. Riley Reiff and Brian O'Neill. Now, Riley Reiff, I think, had the best year out of anyone last year. The Vikings were ranked 25th out of 32 according to Pro Football Focus, which I take very serious. They do a wonderful job there. The Vikings have the 25th best out of 32 offensive lines. And when I say let's look at the tackles here, I'll tell you why. Because Riley Reiff and Brian O'Neill, by the way, Riley Reiff only gave up 3 sacks last year. Brian O'Neill let up 0. They're going to have to go against the cream of the crop this year. And when you look at the schedule of the Vikings, it's very defensive heavy. It is a lot of teams with a boatload of talent on that defensive side. First one is the obvious, Khalil Mack. The Vikings have to go against Khalil Mack for 2 years thanks to John Gruden. Khalil Mack had 12.5 sacks last year. He creates havoc. Just having him on the field, his presence alone makes offenses change the way they usually like to do things. And for Reiff and O'Neill, how are they going to be able to do against a guy like Khalil Mack? Another team that the Vikings are going to face is the Dallas Cowboys, who have another outstanding, young, elite defense. DeMarcus Lawrence, 10.5 sacks last year, coming off a new contract. They just signed him to 5 years, $105 million extension. DeMarcus Lawrence is a problem. How is O'Neill, how is Riley Reiff going to put up with that? Joey Bosa from the Chargers. He battled injury last year, but he had 12.5 sacks the year before that. And Melvin Ingram, who had 7 sacks last year. 2 guys on that Chargers defense that's going to create a bunch of problems. How will the tackles hold up? Because obviously the tackles are going to get the boatload of the action with these edge rushers. That's how it works unless they're stunting them and they're going inside to Eflon and Klein, which I don't think they'll do. I think they'll attack guys like Reiff and O'Neill and make them move their feet. And then Von Miller. Von Miller had 16 sacks last year, arguably the best edge rusher in the league behind Khalil Mack. Those are the guys, just a couple of the guys, and they obviously face a bunch of great defensive fronts here. But the offensive line, the tackles especially, are going to have monumental problems if they don't figure this thing out. Because you've got the Bears twice in Khalil Mack, you've got the Cowboys this year, you've got the Chargers this year with Bosa and Ingram, you've got the Broncos this year with Von Miller, a bunch of scary edge rushers that can change the game in a single play. How will those two hold up? Brian O'Neill out of Pittsburgh, this is going to be his second year. I thought he played pretty damn well for a rookie. He's got to grow up a little bit more, a little more mature. And Riley Reiff, I expect nothing more than a solid year from him because he's really been really good with the Vikings these last 2 years. In that 2017 year where they went to the NFC Championship, Riley Reiff was unbelievable. I'm pretty sure he made a Pro Bowl that year. So if he can get back to that magnitude of play, the Vikings will be set. But this season, I can't stress it enough, is predicated on the offensive line. And there's nothing more than that. They have to be able to protect the quarterback and run the ball effectively if they want to be in games this year to win. Do I believe they're a Super Bowl contender team? Yes, I do. But if they don't figure out this offensive line, and I think they did a good job fortifying it this year, everything else is in question. Okay, last thing here before we wrap things up. My Strom stud of the week, who goes to a player, coach, team. This goes to the Minnesota Twins. Yesterday on Friday, the Twins made MLB history to be the quickest team to 200 home runs. It's an unbelievable record. Max Kepler hit the record-setting one yesterday, as again, I'm recording here on a Saturday. Look, I don't know what's happened here. I don't know what has gotten into this team this year. This went from a small ball team to a powerhouse